Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Mo, for the introduction. My name is Pete Rizzo. I'm the editor for CoinDesk, which is the world's largest blockchain news platform. We specialize in events, news, and research. You can find us at coindesk.com. So today's topic is innovation in the UAE. So we've seen a lot of presentations today that talk in a lot of detail about how blockchain is being used. And the goal of this panel is to take a step back and talk a little bit more about innovation. You have a new exciting technology like blockchain, and there are other technologies that have taken similar paths to market and have advanced in certain ways, and there are certain learning lessons that the technology community has learned through these processes. So I think this will look more at the big picture kind of challenges that blockchain is likely to face through the lens of some other success stories in the past. So I'll go down the line here and introduce our panelists. So we have first to my right here, Victor Kyriakos, Managing Director for Flat 6 Labs, which is a startup accelerator. To the left there, we have David Chapman, COO at blockchain startup Anx International, financial services startup, working to bring blockchain technology to the market and solutions including digital assets and payment solutions. We have to the left there Anthony Butler, CTO at IBM Cloud. He's been working closely with its blockchain program, innovating and working with industry startups and large enterprises there. Next to the left we have Magnus Olsson, co-founder and chief navigator at Cream, the region's largest chauffeur car service, which has raised upwards of $70 million. And last but not least, Alvaro Abella, managing partner at Becco Capital, MENA-focused VC firm. Investments include Kareem and Property Finder and some other members of the Global Blockchain Council that we heard from this morning. So I guess I want to introduce this panel. On the way over here, I was reading magazine Scientific American, which is very big in the US. Talks a lot about the future. It talks a lot about concepts that we would consider very space age. AI, we have synthetic foods, we have driverless cars. We have all these big ideas that sound like the stuff of movies. They sound like the future. And I think there's a good quote that I heard recently is, I can imagine a future where they're all driverless cars. What I can't imagine is my grandmother driving on the road with them. So we have this idea that we're moving towards a future, but we have to go through intermediate steps to get there. So I want to throw to the panelists as a first question. Let's start with, how do you define innovation? What is innovation to you? And how would you describe your approach to that? So I guess we'll start with Victor.
So basically, we're as a Flat 6 Labs, we invest in early stage digital startups, and we try to invest in kind of like the future trends. So we highlight the new technologies, the trends that are coming in. We look at the companies and we see if they're fulfilling any real need in the market using that technology. That need could be for improving a user experience, improving, fulfilling a market need, and what have you. So we assess these trends based on user needs, and then if there is a big potential for them, we do invest in them, and we help them shape their offering accordingly. So that's kind of what.
So David, we'll go next with you. So what does it mean to be innovative? Obviously, you're working with an emerging technology, but what makes you innovative, and what is innovation to you?
Sure, thanks, Pete. Innovation is, for us, it was the ability to not remain so rigid. What we discovered is that our customers found new ways to use our products, and as a result of that, we actually matured our product and changed strategy. Innovation should be a case of trying new ideas, trying new things, but for us, it was actually the customers who best defined how our product worked. And if I elaborate on what happened in that case, ANX International started out as a Bitcoin exchange. We had a number of innovative firsts. We were the first Bitcoin exchange that offered a Bitcoin debit card that allowed customers to convert Bitcoins into real fiat currency and use that anywhere in the world where MasterCard, Visa, or China UnionPay was accepted. Interestingly, when we did that, the customers came to us, and not only did they see the debit card we offered, but they looked at us and said, wow, you guys offer a technology platform. You can offer mobile apps, web wallets, and you can also combine that with a USD MasterCard that holds $50,000 US. And we said, yeah, we can. And what was interesting about that is the customers then said, well, we want that component, we want that component, and we want that component. And they used that in ways that we'd never seen before. And as a result of that, The Bitcoin exchange part of our business actually represents a very tiny portion of our revenues. We're actually now providing white label technology and payment solutions.
So Anthony, maybe you can build off of that. IBM, obviously, huge company working on a lot of things, and is really, is a technology company first. So, how do you work with somebody, like David, who has a new idea, is really excited, and is still kind of iterating, even just figuring out basic concepts like what is blockchain, how should it be used? How do you work with someone in that environment?
So the way that I describe, what IBM does in this space is kind of we provide the atomic building blocks for innovation, whether it's cloud, whether it's cognitive, whether it's blockchain. So we're making that available to the public. We're supporting the ecosystem to develop new ideas. We're working with large startups, small startups, working with incumbents, working with enterprises of all types, because we don't really know what all the potential use cases for blockchain are going to be, and we don't believe anyone has that full picture yet. This is very much an emergent technology. So if I use blockchain as an example, early last year, the corporation made a decision that blockchain was something that was going to be absolutely fundamental, not just to the future of our company, but would ultimately transform many of the industries that we work with on a day-to-day basis. Whether it's public sector, whether it's private sector, that blockchain would really deliver transformational value and allow us to reinvent business transactions that in many cases, such as the letter of credit or double entry accounting, haven't been modified or haven't been transformed for hundreds and hundreds of years. So it was really a transformational technology. So to that end, what we did is we took 44,000 lines of code. We opened that to the public. We worked with the Linux Foundation to help create the Hyperledger project. And we're trying to embrace the ecosystem, right? Whether it's incumbents, whether it's enterprises, or whether it's startups, and make all of that technology available in the hope that, that this really takes off.
Okay. So Magnus, I guess let's pull out a little bit. So you guys, you're a startup. You've been around. You're working with whole different emerging technologies. Also on the blockchain council. So what is innovation to you as a startup at this stage? That has scale. How do you still innovate? And what is innovation to you now? Is it different than when you started?
So good morning, everyone. Awesome to be here. So many of you might know Kareem, and you know us as a transportation provider or a car booking service, which is what we are. But the mission of Kareem is to simplify and improve the lives of people. And I believe that simplifying and improving lives of people is a lot about just reducing friction. And we started by reducing friction in the transport space, but we're quite excited about reducing friction in other verticals as well as we grow and capacity. When I think about innovation, and I guess I represent the startup on the panel. It is all about being super agile. You don't know what the final end product will look like, so you have to start super small and then just iterate from there. And just to kind of put some color on this for the room, when we started Kareem, which was first day of Ramadan in 2012, this was 22nd of July, we said, let's do the first ride within 5 weeks. And within 5 weeks, we did our first ride without any technology. We had a list of captains that we had met in the airport. We wrote these SMSs by hand. Your car is on the way. We had nothing, right? And still today, we have a vision for where we want to go, but then we drive the organization on 2-week cycles. So we work in 2-week sprints in a very agile way. So when I think about innovation, it is that, sure, you need to have your antennas out for the big things that are going to come. And we're looking at blockchain. We're looking at maybe offering Bitcoin as a payment option as a very specific example. But we also don't try to assume that we know where things are going to go. So you need to just be very agile. And you need to be very collaborative. And I think that comes to the whole smart city, smart Dubai vision as well, that at the end of the day, you need to create a platform where people can innovate, because the innovation will come from, it's a collaborative innovation. You need to have small entrepreneurs like us coming together with government entities, semi-government entities, and big technology partners, providers, and investors, and then that's when the magic happens.
Right.
So I think the thing that will make innovation happen is to create that ecosystem where all these different parties can coexist and do cool stuff together.
So Alvaro, I guess I'll talk to you about this. So there are a lot of really interesting ideas, and even Magnus, where he'll say even this far into the startup process, he's not sure where he's going. So how do you, as a someone on the capital side, choose an idea and say, this is going to be a business, this person is going to create a business. How do you kind of make that determination? What drives your decision making there?
So I guess as a venture capitalist, the nature of the beast is you have to have that very long-term view. And going back to something you started with, American Scientific, I think when people talk about innovation and high tech, traditionally everybody has looked to the West, to the U.S., Silicon Valley specifically, right? But I think that is probably not the case anymore, and will not be probably moving forward. If you read Brad Feld from Founder Group's Startup Communities, he talks about how innovation is actually being sparked everywhere across the world. Why? Because you have readily available access to technologies at a lower cost on an ongoing basis. You have a very distributed and mobile talent base thanks to globalization. You obviously have also mobility of capital. And I guess as a venture capitalist, that's why we're here. We take that very long-term view of 10 years down the road. I came here in 2005, and definitely you couldn't order food online through an app. When you looked for the next property to rent, it was on one of the magazines. You do that online through Property Finder. There's a little pitch there for one of our portfolio companies. Or you would actually probably hail a cab on the street, and it was crazy trying to get out on any of the large holidays and grab a taxi. It was almost impossible, and obviously the telephone lines were always flooded. Yeah, so you really have to take a long-term view and say, how are you going to conduct your everyday life? Whether it's moving from one place to another, where it's looking for the next place to eat, whether it's getting on a plane, what have you. I think definitely over the next 10 years, we're going to see many different changes across our region, and predominantly because you have this legacy infrastructure, which in places like the Middle East, where you have the option to leapfrog a lot of these both hard and social infrastructures, is great opportunities there.
Yeah, and I guess of course there's a crowded marketplace of technologies. When you're talking about a lot of you guys have talked about making things better. So I guess with Magnus, I'm curious. What makes something stick out to you? What makes a new technology something that goes from, oh, that's interesting, I like talking about it, to I'm going to put someone on my team in that department to focus on that. So I guess Magnus or Anthony, I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on that.
I think I'll answer the question not only focused on technologies, but how you can make use of that technology. Because we have had many ideas along the way of cool technologies that let's use this and let's build this into our product, and it's going to be customers going to love it. Very often customers don't love it because they don't care. Customers don't care about technologies, right? I think that was said on the previous panel. Customers care about the use cases, right? So for us, for example, we have spent a lot of time over the last year to build a lot of technology for smarter dispatching, particularly related to a use case where a customer wants to book a car on a repeat basis. And this came to us this didn't start as a technology idea. This started as a customer use case idea. So one of our largest markets is Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, currently, women don't drive. The Saudi government estimates that between 3 to 4 million female in Saudi additionally would work if they had a way to get to and from work. That's 3 to 4 million people. What do they need? They need a reliable service for everyday basis, so that they can say, pick me up at home at 8 a.m. every morning and take me to work and take me back. So this was more of a product-led innovation. And I think as a startup, as a consumer-based startup like we are not driving technology innovation. We're driving product innovation, and then we plug in the relevant technology where it fits. Right? Then there's other types of innovative companies that are driving the technology innovation, but that needs a different setup.
Well, I was going to say, Anthony, it sounds like you have the mandate that's a little bit different. You went out investigating a technology like blockchain, you found ways to apply it, but you have to convince maybe some other people in Magnus's position to use it, to define the product fit for that technology. So I guess, how does that process work from your end, where you're maybe working at it from the opposite point of view?
So, I mean, even though it may be a little bit counterintuitive because we're a technology company, we don't start with technology. So we start with what is the user experience, what is the potential to have a positive impact on people's lives or people's businesses, right? So that's why blockchain is interesting to us as a company. It's not because it's a cool technology, it's not because, you know, it's a trend, it's because it can actually make a difference to how people interact with each other, how they interact with governments, and how businesses can interact. So we start, you know, with thinking, what is the potential for this to transform human experience? And based on that, we understand whether the technology is something that we want to invest in and we want to develop and eventually promote to our clients and to the broader ecosystem. So we still start from the same point as Magnus started from.
So I'm interested, I guess, David, and when you're hearing this, you know, from a blockchain perspective, when you hear how these players are looking at the technology, I mean, what's your reaction in terms of where blockchain is at in this spectrum of you know, moving it forward?
I'll probably be the bad person in the room and say that blockchain is overhyped. The potential there is fantastic. It's an awesome technology. Do I think it's got more hype than big data, you know, 3 or 5 years ago? Sure. Does it deserve that accolade? I think it does. Coming back onto the previous question with respect to innovation, you know, at ANX we see so many, you know, incumbents or players, startups come to us to say, this is our technology, can we partner with you? We want to use your services, or let's do a joint venture. And for us, in addition to, you know, the comments that have been made today, time to market is everything. You know, if someone comes to us and says, we say to them, when is your product live? When is it going to launch? If they say 12 months, we're not interested. Because likelihood, if you look at history, in 12 months' time, 95% of the people that were doing blockchain initiatives don't exist anymore. And that's just the truth. There are so many people saying, I'm going to change the world because we have blockchain delivering technology. For ourselves at ANX, blockchain is a fundamental piece of it, but it's not what we're selling. It's a fantastic piece of technology, but it just works for what we need it to do. It is a bank in a box, and it provides awesome security, reliability, availability, all these things. But it is still just technology. The fact that your idea or product operates on blockchain isn't going to sell it, unfortunately.
So you're talking about partnerships, and I'm interested, Victor, for your perspective on this. Is you know, so if, like David was saying, you know, the turnover in a new technology space is so quickly. You know, you have new startups that they come in, they come out. So I guess, what advice would you give to people in the space who are looking to partnerships as a solution? Is this, you know, how should they treat these, and what would you say, I guess, to them as they look to go forward with it?
So, you know, like from the startups that we take on board, you know, it's very important for them also to, you know, leverage the ecosystem that we're building. That ecosystem is around mentors and corporates as well as investors. On the corporate side, what we've seen is that more and more corporates are more, they understand better the agility, they want to be more agile. They want to leverage the technology before somebody else beats them to it. So we've seen a lot of like understanding from that side. And we're also trying to support the corporate to be more agile. So we enable them to engage better with our startup. It's very important for these guys, like the startups, to get to market as fast as possible and to reach a lot of people, especially in this region where investors typically want to see some traction before they invest and all of that. It's important to kind of reach the market quickly. And I think corporates could be a good partner for these startups.
So David, are you more critical now with partnerships? Are you more apt to turn people away?
For sure.
Yeah.
From 3 years of doing business, for sure. It used to be a case, oh my God, look, we've got this opportunity. Whereas now it's a case of, can someone qualify and validate this before we even entertain the idea?
Right. So Anthony, is it the same thing? I guess, you know, when you're, you know, from your perspective as of an enterprise working with startups, you know, I guess how do you, are you conscious of needing to engage with them in a certain way, of you needing to respect their time, their need to move forward? I mean, how do you engage properly with a startup that is looking to innovate and move fast?
So the way that we've addressed that, particularly with respect to blockchain, but it extends across all the portfolio, is trying to make everything available through the cloud. So we democratize access to all of these services. So instead of having to go and negotiate with an IBM salesman and ultimately sign a contract that could take a long time, everything is now available in the cloud. Someone with a credit card, whether they're sitting in the remotest part of the world, can get access to most of our services, including blockchain. Right. So we're trying to democratize access and get out of the way of the innovation. That's one way that we've been doing it. But I think one of the things that's particularly interesting about blockchain is that it's one of those rare opportunities where you're seeing enterprise and startups work together. So a lot of the innovation that's being adopted or being embraced by the enterprise is actually born out of startups, which is quite an interesting dynamic with respect to what we're seeing around blockchain.
So I guess I want to turn the conversation a little bit right now, to innovation, just the dynamics between markets around the globe. I think, a lot of cases we've seen emerging markets, the strategy is sometimes to take innovation from elsewhere and then adapt it to a local market. So we see things like, you'll have a solution like eBay, and then you'll see the eBay of Latin America, or the eBay of Australia, or the eBay of Africa. You'll see a lot of startups where their inclination is to play to their strengths, take an existing business model, and adapt it with a local strategy. So I guess, Magnus, I'm interested in your take on this. How do you as a region, how do you potentially leapfrog or potentially change that kind of narrative?
You want to answer? So I guess you might implying that there are companies that are doing similar stuff to us in other parts of the world. I haven't heard of any actually. So I think this comes back to like what Alvaro mentioned, and was mentioned as well by, I think, Anthony, that what's really cool in this part of the world, I've been here for 10 years, I'm originally from Sweden, is that there is a lot of white space to do innovation, because there's a lot of old bricks and mortars that is not, bricks and mortars that become very old legacy in whatever industry vertical you look at. That's not there and blocking it, right? But there's also a lot of things that are not in place that a small startup like us, it would be great to innovate on top of. In the process of starting Careem, we were like, oh man, we should start a bank, we should start a telco, we should start a lot of things along the way, because the things that we needed to just innovate on top, they were not there. So we had to go very deep in terms of building the infrastructure. But when it comes to building, I don't necessarily at all believe in taking something that is successful elsewhere for these reasons and just copying it. For us, when we started, Careem was a corporate booking service. We were solving a local problem. We were previously consultants, so we were serving our previous employer, which needed business transportation as you were traveling. We didn't have an app. We didn't have on-demand booking. We only had pre-scheduled bookings. So we had, so without telling you the whole story, the point of it is that you need to be providing local solutions and local products for the local needs. And those needs are quite different. For us, they're even very different between countries. They're even very different between cities for us. So, the type of customers I have in Riyadh are very different than the type of customers I have in Abu Dhabi, or the type of customers I have in Karachi. And what's top of mind in Karachi, which is safety, whereas in Cairo, top of mind is how to get rid of the traffic. So the key point, I think, is of course you can look at global phenomena and global innovation, take the blockchain, but what you make with it has to be completely tailored to the local market and the local ecosystem, and you need to solve a local problem. If you're not solving a local problem, your thing is not going to work. So I think there was some examples in the previous panel of company registration, which works in a particular way in the free zones in TCOM. Right. That's a local, local solution to a local, problem or local setup done with a global technology. I think that's how you have to do it.
So Alvaro, would you agree? And I guess off of that, is funding an issue here? Is that something where you see this as kind of holding back maybe innovation here going global, or?
Actually, I don't think that funding is the issue. Maybe depending on the stage, but I think that's a different discussion for another day. But as Magnus was saying, applying outside concepts to very local problems and local opportunities, I think is something that is very appealing to everybody that comes to Dubai, to the UAE, to the GCC. And I believe it's actually ingrained in the DNA of Dubai. Taking another large story, you know, Emirates Airlines, if I'm not mistaken, started with 2 leased planes from PIA. And from that, they grew into this behemoth of in the travel sector on a global scale. So as Dr. Aisha was saying earlier this morning, you know, the opportunities to avail from the technology innovation and using it, as Magnus is saying, to local problems and making local sectors even more efficient, even more cost efficient, but also less fraudulent, etc. Thinking of logistics, right? Jebel Ali is, I believe, in the top 10 ports in the world, ahead of any city in Europe, South America, or the US. Only Asian cities are, in terms of TEU equivalents, are actually ahead of Jebel Ali. I think it's north of 15 million containers processed through Jebel Ali on a yearly basis. If you can apply blockchain technologies to make that more efficient, reduce fraud, et cetera, the potential is enormous. So I think, again, we're here to continue to back those startups and those initiatives that are able to avail global solutions for very localized problems.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the role of government in this process as well. You know, specific to blockchain, I think we've seen, you know, in the U.S. and the U.K., we've seen some very different approach from global regulators. I think, you know, in the U.S. Was one of the earliest in 2014. You know, they were very quick to impose a rule set or to try to get the industry under its control to figure out, you know, how it could best fit in the rule structure. I think, you know, the UK now, you know, has come out and they've said, you know, maybe they went a little bit too far. Let's be more encouraging. Let's invite more of these startups in and put forth a framework where, you know, they can perhaps flourish or have more encouragement in order to grow. So I guess, Anthony, I'm curious, you know, for your perspective here. You know, what can Dubai look to do locally here? Should it follow any of these previous patterns in your perspective, or you know, should it do something new? Or, yeah.
So if you look at fintech more broadly, you know, when they look at what are the sort of success factors, or you know, what is the secret sauce, if you will, for building a successful fintech ecosystem, it typically comes down to 4 pillars, right? So access to capital, access to markets, access to skill, and then the fourth, and the one that most of the markets are lacking, is regulatory support, government support, right? So I think, you know, the first 3, I think, you know, everyone would agree we have those here in Dubai in particular. We have access to skills. We clearly have access to markets, both local and adjacent, and also further afield. And you know, the fact that we are having this event shows that the government is supporting it, right? So I think, you know, rather to your point, I think that Dubai is actually providing an example of what other governments should be doing in terms of how they should support the development of blockchain and its adoption by private and public sector. So rather than look to the US or look to the UK, I think, you know, we're on a track that they should be looking to us.
So David, would you agree? I mean, you've been out there, you've worked in different jurisdictions. Is this one of the most supportive regions, or?
For sure. So I definitely agree with Anthony's comments. It's been an interesting journey for me. It not only are governments now more supportive, the regulators are pushing for it. It's also a case of because they have to. You know, they're watching what's happening around other corners of the globe, and they're almost got this FOMO, this fear of missing out. Right. They need to change. And for me, the most interesting thing, and it's also humorous and equally satisfying, is when I left my investment banking career to do a startup around Bitcoin and blockchain. You know, it was laughed at. It was comical. And what I've seen in the last 3 years is this cycle. It's gone from comical to dismissal, and then to fear, where they're like, oh my God, we're all scrambling. We all need these teams. We all need this technology. To now acknowledgement. You know, 3 weeks ago I was in Singapore at the Cards and Payments Expo, and it's the first conference I've been to where there are major players. You know, we're talking Credit Suisse. You know, all your investment banks are on stage now, and they're not saying Bitcoin is never going to work. What they're instead saying is they've acknowledged that decentralized technologies are going to change the world. You know, and the real key that has come out of the last 12 months is that mobile applications, peer-to-peer, decentralized technologies, and emerging markets. That's going to be a huge game changer, is that everyone now is trying so hard to focus on financial inclusion. The UN defines financial inclusion as giving unbanked people the use of accounts, transactions, credit, and insurance. And there are so many people, including startups, that are so much more nimble and they're allowed to do that because of technologies such as blockchain. And what I predict and what I anticipate seeing is that if these products work so well in the emerging markets, they'll come back into the developed countries, into the Western world as well, and they'll leapfrog these huge behemoth banks that haven't changed their ways since the 60s. So it'll be a very interesting time over this next 5 to 10 years. I think it'll be a radical shift.
So Victor, I guess are these new patterns? Is this a specific kind of trend that's developing with blockchain, or is this kind of similar pattern with other technologies in the past?
So on the fintech side, what we've seen is basically from Abu Dhabi, for example, we're working closely with the regulator, who's the Abu Dhabi Global Market Regulator, who wants to kind of push that ecosystem. And as Anthony was saying, he's taking care of that piece, which is the regulation, which is a very good stepping stone to really create that fintech ecosystem. Similar to what we've done, for example, with the media zone, where we've created an ecosystem around media startups. So I think there is a good understanding in the UAE of the importance of fintech in general. What we also seen personally in other countries is when the regulation is not there, some of the players, the financial institutions, are trying to push the regulator. So for example, in Cairo, we're going to be launching a fintech program with an international bank. And the regulation there are not really that prominent. However, the bank wants to kind of push that agenda and felt that doing a program, a fintech program, running it and showcasing the startups might drive the regulation. So it depends really on each market. So some regulators are much more advanced than others, but the opportunity is there and people are willing to push forward.
I think we've also often heard when you speak to startups, they're really quick to say that regulation, I guess, is holding back the environment. It sounds like here that's not the case. So I guess David, I guess if blockchain isn't being held back by regulation, what are the biggest pain points for the technology? How does it move forward from here?
I think it is market by market in terms of regulator approval and support. In Hong Kong, for example, where ANEX is based, virtual currencies are still unregulated. And there doesn't seem to be a huge drive as much as there is an acceptance that is happening. The other thing that really hinders every startup, especially one that focuses on new technologies and uncommon themes, is banking support. Banks do not want to help you. That's what I've found. There are very few banks that are willing to say, we understand what you're doing. Yep, you're probably a threat to our business. We're going to offer you banking support. It just doesn't happen. And that seems to be, at least in my limited experience, is still the one part which is still proving very hard to change. And we have banks that do actually partner with blockchain companies, but then we find out that's an exclusive arrangement and it can't get opened out to other players. So they are very selective. Is it moving? Yes. Is it moving fast enough? In my opinion, no.
Anthony, would you agree with that perspective? I mean, is it really a case of these banks and institutions are willing to work with startups in one respect, and in the other respect, not help move their business forward?
Yeah, I would agree. And the other challenge that we have is around, because if you think about the value proposition of blockchain, it really involves business networks. So you have multiple participants. So there's challenges around how do you coordinate those participants and how do you convince them of the value of blockchain. So there's still a lot of education that needs to happen in some markets. UAE is probably much further advanced in that respect than some of the others. But I think people are still understanding what is the potential of blockchain and what are the use cases. People tend to think it's only related to Bitcoin and very specific financial services sector possibilities, but there's a lot of others that are also being explored around supply chain provenance and so on and so forth. So I think there's an awareness that needs to happen as well.
So Magnus, I think anything you can offer, I guess, as somebody who's worked with emerging technologies, has reached a bit of scale. I mean, is this something that has a parallel in the work you've done?
I think it depends a bit on what use case you're trying to implement, right? If you can find something small that you can start small and scale, then you can just let the entrepreneur, start, and they are going to be the best at innovating and starting something and scaling it. But if you're going to implement this in an area of society that is kind of for the public, for the broader public good, be it like identification or property registry or financial transactions, then it's tricky to start that as a at a small scale in a corner somewhere, right? We could start with 5 cars in Dubai, and then we grow to 10, and then 100, and whatever, right? So to make that happen, I think then you need to have the government to help to both facilitate the collaboration, because we said it a bit like what's happening on the blockchain council, that people actually come together, and also maybe to interfere to break up any sort of monopolized positions in some industries that would not allow others to come in, right? So I think it depends a bit on what vertical and what use case you're trying to get into. Is there room for something to grow organically and then become big? Or is it just kind of a binary thing? There's one system of identification. Either it's on this new technology or it's not. Like it's a bit more binary, right?
So Alvaro, would you agree? Or?
Again, I think it goes back to what Magnus was saying, the usage case. We, as investors in technology, could be fascinated by a new technology, but if it doesn't have real-world application in a large addressable market base in our region, because we invest solely in our region, and it has to be solving a real-life problem, a large problem. It's not, Matchbox Mercedes. It has to be the Mercedes truck, ideally, or the Swedish Volvo truck, whatever.
So I guess in your opinion, what's the biggest, what's holding back blockchain in the region? Is it something that's specific to blockchain, or is it something larger? Is it internet penetration? Is it something like that? Or?
I think it's probably understanding, first of all, the application of blockchain. And I think, again, it's only recently that it's become mainstream media and we're learning more about it. Before it was, I think as Dave was saying, a garage project for many different innovators. And I think it takes that adoption rate to then starting to understand what are the potential usage cases, and people start to tinker with that.
So I guess, Magnus, how do you take time for the understanding? You're obviously running a huge operation. If you need to come up to speed on blockchain, I mean, how do you take the time to make sure that you're getting up to speed on it?
On new technologies in general?
In general, yeah, or blockchain specific, yeah.
I think, there's so many ways you can do that, right? But I think coming to attending conferences with people that are leading in this field, which is a lot more leading thinkers than I am. I'm a car entrepreneur. That's how I do it. I think there are some inspiring startups in the room, both from the region and globally, and I tend to feel that that's where I learn the most from fellow entrepreneurs.
Okay. I think, unfortunately, that's all we have for time here. But thanks to the panelists for coming, and I appreciate everybody listening as well.